Hello friends, welcome to another Magic Monday. Today we are looking at my Alchemical Romance with Nashi Illusion Gadgeteer, a 4-mana 4/4 rat rogue with Menace and Ward 2. When Nashi enters, secretly choose a card in your graveyard and conjure a duplicate of it into your hand. If the duplicate isn't a land, it perpetually gains Flash. So this is only when the commander enters, but we're going to have some fun with that, and I'll show you why. This deck, under the hood, 33 creatures, 26 non-creatures, heavier blue, but they're all pretty evenly split. Average mana cost of 2.8. 7 instants, 10 sorceries, 7 artifacts, 3 enchantments, and a planeswalker with 40 lands. So the theme of this deck is that every card in it, aside from the lands, is an alchemy set, whether it's Alchemy 24, Alchemy 22, Alchemy 23, 22, 24, 23, 22, you get the idea. Some of them are even like the weird other sets, like Alchemy, I don't know, whatever. They're all alchemy cards. So anyway, what we want to do here is just do weird stuff with this alchemy set, which lets us secretly choose things and conjure and seek and all this stuff. So like Experimental Pilot, not a particularly great card in this deck, but he fits the theme. And if we have a situation where we need to discard a couple of cards because what we have is junk, we can get ourselves a vehicle just because it fits the theme. Piece it together doesn't make any sense in this deck because you can't have duplicates in Brawl, but for 1 blue you draw a card. And if you want, I mean, you can use Nashi to create a duplicate of this card, which then has Flash, so it's basically an instant, and then you can do it again. This Tome of Gadwick, it conjures something from a spell book, most of which are just like, you know, draw card, draw card, draw card. There's that piece it together again. So not great, but it does its thing in the theme. Cursebound Witch, again, spell book, all sorts of stuff. Grave Expectations lets us heist or exile cards. March Towards Perfection, another draft option here. Tenacious Pup gives us that one-time creature boon. Soul Stealer X lets us seek stuff. Clone Crafter conjures a random duplicate of a creature card from our opponent's library. Crazy. Emporium Thopterist conjures an Ornithopter every turn for us, because why not? Landlord Navigator lets us make map tokens and then conjure stuff called Thieving Magpies, which is a 1/3 that when it deals damage to an opponent, we get to draw a card. Mapping the Maze lets us choose an instant or sorcery in our hand or graveyard, perpetually incorporate blue to it, and when you cast the spell, draw a card, then return a multicolored instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Not that we have a lot of multicolored instant or sorceries in this deck, but it fits the theme, guys. Sinister Reflections conjures a duplicate of up to 2 target non-token creatures we control into our hand. That's pretty cool, because then we can have more of the same stuff. Vesuvian Mist lets us return something to our opponent's hand. And if we kicked it, we get a copy of that. Very handy. This slowly lets us kill off our opponent's creatures. This lets us exile stuff from their hand. This guy lets us make creatures in our graveyard into artifacts that we can cast again. So that's kind of fun. So let me tell you, if you're going to copy a deck, you can copy this, but change it, because it will be much stronger if you put in things like mana rocks. You notice so far there's no mana rocks. There's no mana rocks in Alchemy. Something like this, where we're doing a lot of graveyard manipulation, there's stuff that really benefits from graveyard manipulation, but it's not in the Alchemy set, so it's not in here. So before you get your hopes up that this is some uber powerful deck, it's not. I'm messing with the theme here. Swarm Saboteur lets us make virus beetles. This thing lets us do stuff to our opponent's hand, making them discard 1 or 2 cards. Ravenous Pursuit is like Rabid Bite, except we choose a creature card in our hand, it gets perpetually gets plus XX, where X is the amount of excess damage. Just for 2 mana. It's pretty cool. This thing lets us find lands in our library and dump them into our graveyard. Why do we want that? Well, because then we can use them with Nashi if we need to grab a land, or it removes lands from our library if we have enough mana and we want to actually draw something that we can play. This guy lets us exile the top card of our opponent's library face down. Then we lose life. Then we can play that card. This one lets us search the top third of our library. This guy lets us draft stuff. Silent Extraction counters a spell unless the opponent pays 2. And then if we have 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we get to seek a creature card with the same mana value as the chosen spell. This Gnat lets us do weird stuff, because whenever it deals combat damage to a player, a random non-land card in that player's hand perpetually gains when you cast the spell. You get a poison counter. So weird. Ominous Traveler, just another draft card. Choice of Fortunes lets us seek stuff. Oracle of the Alpha puts the P9 in here. So we got Time Walk, we got Black Lotus, we got all this good stuff. Just dumped right in there. Tireless Angler lets us draft some big fish. This guy lets us seek cards equal to the number of poison counters that our opponent has. Predatory Sludge is weird. It lets us conjure more creatures called Predatory Sludge. This thing lets us draft 2 cards from its spellbook, all of which are like mana rocks. These are the only mana rocks in here. So we basically draft 2 of these, put one of them onto the battlefield tapped. Okay, cool. Gets us some mana rocks. Settle the Wilds lets us seek a basic land and then seek a permanent card with equal to the number of lands we control. Spawning Pod lets us sack a creature so then we can make a copy of it with our commander and then manipulate it that way. This one's super weird. It's mostly the second part. At the beginning of your end step, the topmost land card in your library perpetually gains whenever this land is tapped for mana. Add an additional green. So strange. This slime, when it dies, we conjure a duplicate of it into our graveyard, double the power of all of the slimes, and then shuffle them into our library. So it's kind of just very strange. This one I really like. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, choose one of those creatures, conjure a duplicate of it into your hand. Kindred Denial lets us seek stuff. Nightclub Bouncer lets us make bounce their stuff, and then it costs more. This Collector, we get to seek stuff. Metamorph lets this become a copy of whatever we want that's on the battlefield. We got this Crawler here. I'm not going to go through the whole deck, but this one is really silly. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, creature cards in your library perpetually get +1/1. If we're playing against like a red-blue deck or an artifact deck, I mean, our creatures are going to get +8/8 by the time they start coming into play. It's wild. Here's our one Planeswalker who lets us draft cards or perpetually make our creatures better. This Wolf, when it dies, we seek a permanent card with mana value equal to the number of lands we control. And then we can bring it back with our commander, which is cool. Legion of Clay. Whenever 1 or more non-token artifacts you control enter, creatures you control perpetually get +1/1. But let's go back here. We only have 7 artifacts. It's not that good of a card in here, but it works with the theme, and it does give all of our creatures trample. Mythweaver Pock to double up our lands. This weird Slicer that lets us conjure a duplicate of target card in opponent's graveyard into my hand. This guy I love. He's like the Rhino that's in the Big Thunder Mountain set. I know it's not called Thunder Mountain. But when he enters, you get a one-time boon with when you cast a creature spell, it perpetually gets +XX, where X is its power. So just double it. This Vantasaur lets us either get Savage Stomp or Naturalize when we play it. The Extractor gets oil counters, and then we seek stuff. Rusko, everybody knows Rusko at this point if you're watching this deck, but basically he makes us a midnight clock. Even this is our 1 mana rock, is Key to the Archive, because you draft stuff from it. This guy I love. I want to put this in a lot of decks. 5/5 trample for 5 mana, already pretty decent, but at the beginning of your end step, non-land cards in your hand perpetually gain this spell costs 1 less to cast. That's so cool. Discover the Formula lets us seek stuff and make it cheaper. This Warzone Duplicator returns target creature an opponent controls with power less than Warzone Duplicator's power to its owner's hand. If that creature wasn't a token, you make a duplicate in your hand. And then we've got Perforator Crocodile, who puts Stab Wound on all of our opponent's creatures, which is fantastic. And then Plunderer's Prize, that lets us seek an artifact with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If the card with mana value less than X is put onto the battlefield this way, this spell perpetually gains. This spell costs 1 more to cast, and then you return it to owner's hand. So here are the options. You got 6 for this guy. You got 4 for this guy. But because there's only 7 artifacts, we've got 1 here. And I missed some, obviously. I think Spawning Pod is an artifact, so 3. So, I mean, if you do 1, you're basically, I think, guaranteed to get Soul Stealer Axe. So for 2 mana, you just seek Soul Stealer Axe and put it on the battlefield. Or you can mess with it a little bit, pay 4 mana, maybe you get Spawning Pod, you know. But it's an alchemy card. And then lands, it's mostly basic lands, but I did put in like the standard dual land kind of stuff. It's the only non-alchemy in here. Phyrexian Tower I put in because we want to actually sacrifice creatures, including our commander, because his ability only triggers when he enters the battlefield. But that's the deck, guys. It's really, really, really weird to play, but it is kind of fun and very random, and I sort of love that about it. So before we get to some games, which we're going to do in just a second, let me just remind you, if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Please consider leaving a like or a subscription or even a comment. And as always, please be kind to yourselves, be kind to each other. Thanks for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one.